I'm visiting in the home of Dr. Earl McBride. This is March the 4th, 1974, and we will be talking about Dr. McBride and his experiences as a youngster living in Watonga, and then his distinguished medical career in Oklahoma for many, many years. Dr. McBride, to begin with, we usually ask the people we interview to tell us their names of their parents, maiden name of their mother, where they came from, and then how they got into Oklahoma, how they came to Oklahoma.
Well, we came to Oklahoma on a stagecoach from Watonga over to I don't know how we got down from Savory, but Kansas, but we, I recall that we drove over to, were driven over to, from, I forget what place we went, but they took us in the stagecoach down to Kingfisher, and then that was in a team of horses and a sort of a stage-like cab, you know.
Who were your parents, Dr. McBride?
My father was Aaron. He said A-double-A-R had to run, or something like that. He used to say it with his name. His name was Aaron. A. McBride was his, all he used, just A. McBride. And he started a small store in the town of Watonga, which was probably a population at that time of maybe 100 people. And the Indians were right in the same area, with a cantonment about 5 miles or 6 miles, and most of the Indians lived out what is now known as Canton, Oklahoma. And they had their own school, more or less, but some of them run with us and played with us in the school ground. So we were quite well acquainted with the actions and of the and their ways of doing, and we just took it for granted, as little boys, that we just played with them and didn't know any difference really. And it kind of suited us afterwards that we did that, because we had quite a lot of connections with the Indians, particularly in my dad's groceries and merchandise that they'd buy.
That cantonment is still there, the ruins of it.
Yes, it's still there in camp.
Why don't you tell us what the cantonment was and what it was for?
Well, it was a camping ground and a cantonment, we called it then, for the Indians, and they were to stay in that particular area. They weren't forced to do anything that I know of. And they came to town and went to town and back. They didn't stay in town. First thing the old squaw would do when they got around the store there, just had sidewalks, board sidewalks, and those were for and these old squaws, you know, they're real fat, maybe about 200 or 300 pounds, some of them, and they'd spread a blanket out on the boards of the walk, which was high enough in some of them places. The one the one that they liked was where they could sit on the porch and cross their feet across each other and then just swing their feet and throw a blanket over her shoulders and sit there for hours. And nobody molested them. We had, as far as Indians concerned, we were also interested in going to their cantonment for a meeting with the Indians that were then as an Apache, I believe some of the Apaches, and the ones that are at the Indians, other types of Indians were in Anadarko, and they would come up on a certain day to celebrate some of their presentations of their show off their fancy blankets and horses, ponies, and dance at night and sometimes in the daytime. And we boys would go down on the river there where they were. The ones on the south side of the North Canadian River would sing their songs. First they'd beat their drums for a while, and then gradually one would start to singing, and then another, just humming some kind of a tune. It didn't sound much a tune, I don't think, but suited them, and they'd do this a while on the south side, and then the people on the north side would do the same similar thing in their language. And we enjoyed that, and we just played with them as if they were family, you know.
What supported that little town of 100 people? What was the cause of that town being there?
Well, Watonga, of course I went there so young that I didn't know much about it, but it was just a town like many towns. It was just people that came in that far and found a place that they liked, and they stopped, as far as I know. I don't know why my father went there, except that he was trained in business.
It's basically a farm town then, wasn't it?
Yes, it was quite, they had to live on the farm and get some start. There wasn't much so they didn't have any, for instance, any great amount of implements for farming. They just brought it from Kansas and different surroundings from Oklahoma.
Can you describe your father's store?
Well, he started with a small wooden shed, and he finally worked up until he had when he had reached his zenith in his trade, he had a 3-story brick building, it was a full block long, and the top floor was a theater, and the second floor was partly storage, and Then they had room there for the Masonic and I guess other club organizations on the second floor.
Did he operate the theater as well as the store?
No, he had nothing to do with that. He just rented them.
What type of theater was this? Was this silent movies or?
No, we didn't have any movies
I see.
that time. They hadn't been born.
What did you have come to the theater? What were the performances at the theater?
Well, they had different things. They, for example, the fellow came there one time with I remember particularly, there was a hypnotist. And my brother and I were glad to see these fellows because, these shows, because they'd give my brother and I something to do, you know. And so one old boy came there, and he, we didn't know what he was doing. We didn't know what hypnotism or anything else. I never heard about it. And so he sat down and told us about what he was going to do. And he said, now, if you want to be in this, why, I'll tell you what to do. So he hypnotized us. I walked off and left him, but my brother stayed right with it, did everything, you know, rolled over and jumped over something and various things.
Were you actually hypnotized, or did he simply?
Well, I wasn't. My brother
was.
I don't think he was. He said he wasn't. He remembered to me what he did. And then we had another time to show the type of entertainment that a little town in those days. A man came to show what he could do with some sleight of hand. And one thing he did, he threw a ball like a pitcher, a straight ball, to him, and this fellow would be blindfolded. And he would catch that ball every time. I remember that. That was one thing that we knew about, was our baseball. And nobody could see anything where he could see the ball or anything else. He had a great big thing, and then he had something else to put over that. And the father was pointed out to throw the ball to him. I don't know whether he threw him a curve or not, but he caught that ball. It was marvelous. I don't know yet how he did it. He must have had some kind of preparation. And then he told the men there, he said, somebody's got a horse and team. We'll try another thing like this. We'll, if you'll get somebody to drive a horse, I'll sit up with them in the front spring wagon. We had just a small wagon. We held groceries and things up to the store. And so people all swarmed around, and this fellow, well, we had my father. The other fellow was driving a while, and then when he got going, he was going just one block from the other. The people would follow him and see. And what he had done, he asked two men to put knife, I believe it was, or money maybe, I don't know which. And that they could blindfold him and drive him around 2 or 3 blocks. And while you're doing that, why these 3 or 4 men will go to hide that knife. And they get a prize for it if they found it. And sure enough, they rode this horse around and back and forth, and he found it all right. Those impressed me as a boy, you know, and to compare, I was telling that mostly because that isn't the kind of a kid that you have anymore, you know.
You're talking about the 1890s.
Yeah.
What did it cost? What did those shows cost?
On a what?
What did it cost to get into those shows? That
Not over a quarter. Most everything of any ordinary thing was a quarter, and a dollar was. They had plenty of dollars, all right, but people didn't depend much on the dollar, and I don't know much about the money part of it at that time, although I clerked in the store when I got old enough.
What about local talent shows?
Well, I don't remember. If they did, it was just some of the people I knew when they went up there and performed and do whatever they did. I remember these spectacular things, you see.
Did your lodges, the Masonic and these others, did they meet in the theater area too?
Yeah, they met in these same areas up in the Dad's store.
Was it set up like a stage with fixed seats, or did you just have loose chairs that would be laid out?
As I remember, they were loose chairs. Just old wooden chairs with, well, they were just like these, wood, you know, and you could move them around. And that's one thing we had to do. We had to set up the chairs and get people to do these things. But
how was the growth of Watonga? You say when you all came there, there was only about 100 people. By the time he had a 3-story building, there had to be more than 100 people to support it.
Yes, he built part-time.
Yes.
He built, he built a brick building. I don't know whether it's 1 story or 2 stories on what they call Main Street. And then as his business grew, he had to spread out, so he built another addition in the back to the alley. And that gave him room to handle his work there. And then he had to dig a hole under the store to take care of some of his stock, to take care of it, because he had to store it, to bring it in by stagecoach until the Rock Island came in there. And brother and I had to stack flour and anything he brought in there as much as we could handle. Finally, they got a new elevator. We thought that was great. It was a great big platform, and he had a rope with a pulley, and it took 2 of us to hang on the rope and pull it down to pull the weight up. But we thought that was fun. We always, brother and I, and we usually get 2 or 3 other boys to help us, and we'd pull the sacks of sugar up or flour or whatever we had. And yeah, just as he needed it, you know, he'd bring up several items. But that's the kind of things that he made us do. He had all kinds of things in there that you could think of. We had Victor, he had the agency for the Victor dictaphone, well, not dictaphone. What did they call the first?
Phonograph?
Phonographs, that's it. I guess phonograph was the first one. Victor.
Yes.
Victor telephone. and they didn't sell many of them. People were kind of skeptical. Then the next item, from the boys' standpoint, was the Nickelodeon. Man came to Watonga and said he was going to show these pictures, and I think he charged a nickel. And I guess that's where it got its name, a Nickelodeon. And I was taking lessons over the fellow that was playing in the little band they had, the clarinet. I took one lesson in the clarinet and kept tooting around till I finally got so I could play in the band. And I ended up living with that, with playing in Oklahoma University band and the concert group that the professor of music established, and we performed there around Norman and music, and then we'd go out to Enid, and well, I don't think they went to Watonga at all, but the larger cities then.
Who was the professor then?
Well, I was trying to think of it as I was talking.
Was it Hamburg?
Hamburg, yes. Oh, I'll tell you a good story on Dr. Hamburg. He was a, let's see, was he Swede? I believe he's Swedish. But he was probably a mixture of Scandinavian. That's the word I was trying to think of. He was a Scandinavian. I don't know his history, but he was a very fine old man and very patient with us ignorant kids. And they would go to different towns during the season, and one of them was Enid. Enid was a nice little town that was growing, and they had a place where they could have a kind of a theater place. And so they put us up on the platform there, and we got all ready that night. We had ducks and all dressed up, you know, with black bow ties, and the women were swishing around their skirts. And I don't know how many we had in that, but we must have had around 10 to 12 people, the different horns. And Enid particularly sticks in my mind because of this event. We, you know, they used to just roll the curtains up at the end of the stage, had to pull it down to bring the curtain up and pull it the other way to get it back down. In fact, it had run down its own cord. And he had a brogue, you know, and he was getting all fixed, you know, and looking around. Now, shh, shh, shh. Trying to keep us still, you know, kids. And so finally he gave them the sign to throw pull the rope and pull the curtain up. So they started pulling this curtain up, and he began to holler. Said, "Hey, wait a minute, stop, quit pulling on that." In his German, his brogue. And they stopped, and there he stood with his, the people out here saw all that going, you see, and it rolled his coat right up over his neck. It was, I'll lose this. Can you get it all right?
Yes, sir.
And I've never forgotten that.
He formed what was the first Oklahoma City Symphony in the early 1920s. Are you familiar with that, or do you remember that?
Yes, when it started here?
Yes. Before the WPA Symphony in the 1920s, Dean Homburg started what was the original symphony.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about it?
Well, I didn't know much about that when they organized it. I was new in town, just out of the Army, and came here in Oklahoma City and started my practice. And didn't have any money, and was just getting some way to try to earn enough for my wife and one child. And I didn't know much about these things like music. I enjoyed music, and I play the piano myself and clarinet, but I've never followed it up. And I think the reason of that is that I didn't get to start in with where they were. So you have to practice, you know, and you have to be expert to be in that sort of thing, and I didn't feel I could do it. But
what about this Watonga band, the early band? Can you tell about it and what you all did in that?
Well, that's where I learned to play a clarinet. My mother was musical. She taught music up in Kansas. She was a girl, and rode a horse with a side saddle on it. And she gave lessons around the neighborhood by taking this horse around and working with this child here, and then go down another place. And as I got older, I heard her singing. It was a contralto voice, and I was kind of mischievous, I think, caused it, but she kept me right by her side in the choir. And she sang contralto, so I sat right by her, of course, and she would tell me to sing, and of course I sang the way she sang. So I played, I always sang bass, or the parts that had harmony in it, rather than just the words of a song. And so all through school, even through college, I promoted quartet, fraternity house. We had, and I played by ear. My mother taught me to play by ear because she wanted me to play the notes, and I got so I could make harmony with my own. So I could go in there in that piano and sit down there right now and make up my own tune, or play a tune. And then my father played the harmonica, and I always got a hold of that when I could get a hold of it and play it. And you could do that by ear with no trouble. And that was really our entertainment.
What about athletics? You indicated you had been interested in baseball. What sort of athletics did you have in the early days of Watonga?
Just played on the or say campus of the schoolyard. Oh, we'd just at the recess we'd say, "Come on, you play center, and you play so and so, and you know, over here you do so and so," and then the other side got up, and then we went to it, you know. Of course, I don't remember remember much about details, but one, and that was that I found myself under about 3 or 4 of the boys and kept yelling them to get off of me. And when I got up, my foot had been pulled under me, and my toes were back where my heel was supposed to be. It wasn't hurting, but there it was, and I'd look at it. You just turn your foot right straight around back, look at it, and see how silly it is. And I took a look at it and wiggled it around and twisted and didn't hurt too much, so I just kept twisting the way it would go, and all of a sudden popped and went back in place. That never crippled me in any way, and I went over to my father's house where we close there at the school and got a couple of boards and fixed me a pair of crutches of my own and went on with school just like ordinary.
When you graduated from high school, how large was the school at that time? About how many students?
Well, it grew pretty fast. People came into Watonga because it turned out to be a nice little trading place. And Gary was about 18 miles south. It was about like Watonga. There was competition for those two counties. And Kingfisher and Enid were a little too far away, so that left a kind of a vacuum for those two towns to use. But the merchants were very cooperative. They got together and organized a racetrack and baseball diamond, and they had an amphitheater, which wasn't very much, but enough to keep maybe 100 people. And the Indians would come over there and perform too in their ceremonies. But they had the baseball, Geary, and towns starting around there.
What about the lake, Watonga, where the Romanos is now?
Oh, Romanos. Well, that's we used to like to go up there because we get on those big white rocks and top of the hills and see all over the place, you know. And that time there was a railroad, Rock Island, that went up through the canyons, and part of it's still present out there. They didn't take it all up. And that went to Enid. I don't know from there which town it went to, but somewhere up in Kansas. But Watonga, in the last few years, was without transportation of railroad. I don't know much about that, except that I heard the fuss about it, and I don't know why, what it was, but it hurt the town pretty badly at the time.
What was the first automobile you remember in Watonga?
Well, that's an interesting thing too. My father wouldn't let anybody get ahead of him if he could, and the liverman, who's one of his good friends, got some kind of an advertisement, and it was what do they call them? They didn't call them automobiles at that time.
Huh? The horseless carriage?
Yeah, horseless carriage, I guess they'd call it. That was one thing they called. And it had open seat and acetylene lamps, and they'd make an awful racket when they'd run, you know. And you had to pump up the tires, and maybe they'd hold it there, and maybe it won't. I had lots of time with automobiles when they started to come up, and the same way with gasoline. They had to, the merchants, one of them was my father, had a little tank of gasoline back of the store, and they'd have a quart or a half gallon thing with a spout on it, so you could just take it and pour it up in there. And the early days were all in themselves. You couldn't go back and find people ever doing that if they had to again.
Did your father have the first one?
Store?
No, the first, the automobile.
No, he had the number two.
Number two.
The delivery one was his friend.
He had the first one, Earl,
They do her in Oklahoma City, though, for he had one.
we drove the town in that car.
Yeah, that was as far as Dallas went
Well,
that time.
it'd be about the equivalent, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But that's true. And I finished school up there in the 9th grade. And of course we had supposed to have had full time for the high school graduation, but I didn't have enough credits to go any further, and about that time my family moved down here to Oklahoma City. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. I just wanted to keep on in school, and several people, some way or other, the word doctor to me appealed to me, but I never thought that I'd do it. For instance, I had one day I had to deliver some groceries that went down on the Rock Island by Greenfield, to a little town of Greenfield by half west. That was about 7 or 8 miles from Geary. And these men that repaired and inspected the railroad had a certain distance to work at them, and they went from Greenfield and Geary, put the whatever they had to implements, stayed down there. But they wanted to come up with my dad and buy his groceries up there. They liked the way he was quite a sociable sort of fella, and he people liked him, just liked to be around him because he could talk and do things. And one day I had to deliver quite a bunch of groceries and things, and I had 2 other boys with me, and old Star, my delivery wagon Star, the horse, and he was pretty smart as a human. He knew every step I was going to make, that horse. And I drove out to the depot and told the other boys they could go with me. I wanted them to help me unload. So we went out there and unloaded and everything, and one of the boys was fooling on the one side of this thing, and first thing you know, it began to run. And the handcar was pretty heavy, and it had this stuff on it. And oh boy, you know, jump on, take a ride. They never thought about getting off. And I yelled at them and run after them. I didn't get on it. And tried to tell them what to do, because they had a brake there sticking up. They could see it. They didn't know what it was. And this boy fell off, and it caught his leg. I don't know now how it was, but they chewed out the cogs that he hit, tore out a big chunk of flesh out of his shin. And we were all around 10, 11, 12, I don't know how old it was. But he bled like the dickens, and the other boys run. They were scared. And so I got a hold of something and held my hand on it because he's bleeding, and that was just natural to do that. And I got these boys back. I just hollering at them and told them to hold this kid and what to do. And I got in there and put an old star down and got the old doctor out. I had one. We had two doctors, one the real old one and the young one. This younger man came with me, and he bandaged it all up, took a few stitches. My brother was with me. He's 2 years old younger, and he fainted. And so we had quite a first experience of being interviewed by anybody. The next day or two, the two strangers came into my dad's store and said they wanted to see Earl McBride. Dad said, "What?" We hadn't told his father about it, you know. And he said, "What do you want with him?" And he says, "I want him to give me a little information." Said, "I'm with the Rock Island Railroad." And even then, that didn't mean anything to him, you know. So I had to tell my dad. Well, he didn't thrash me. He felt like it. He didn't. He let me off. But the first thought I ever had was that of being a doctor was when that happened.
Now you moved here around 1910 to Oklahoma City. Is that right?
Well,
10 or 12.
Let's see. I don't know about dates.
Or I guess it's earlier than that, probably.
Well, I can do it this way. I entered Epworth University in 1906, and that was in what they called the academy. They didn't have high school in there. They had academy, which was 2 years preceding the first year of college.
Like a high school academy.
Yeah, you might say it was. But Epworth was just beginning to get a start.
Well, wasn't that building, that's the old Epworth Methodist Church, wasn't that built about 1906, 1906?
Built before that. It was about,
Much longer before.
well, not very long, about 3 or 4 years, I guess. And that's where I met that woman that's yelling back in there to something.
At Epworth, was she a student there?
She was born at Edmond, and her parents moved down here in Oklahoma City at the same time that he thought that it'd be better to look like what he'd seen then, that there's more people down down this area. And Oklahoma City was on the boom. It was one of those booms that was people run in here at 1889, but it took them 10 or 12 years to get going where we really had something. And so they moved in here about, I don't know how many months, just 2 or 3 months before school opened. And I was, my father was still up at Watonga at that time. Sent me to board a room with a traveling salesman. My dad was, after he left the store business, he went on as a drummer, they call it, where he drove a horse or team of horses and spring wagon all over the northwestern part of Oklahoma, clear out to Cheyenne and almost over to Amarillo, and sold shoes for Tootle Wheeler and Motter, a company that was making shoes up at St. Joe, Missouri, that time.
Had he sold his hardware store?
Well, now I got the two men mixed up. That was my father.
Oh, pardon.
But I started talking about my wife's mother.
Yeah.
And I'm bringing this up to build up the base of our family, and my experience with my family. And we had, I guess, the first day of school that year, there was about 15 or 18 in our class. And that wasn't in college, it was the academy, they called it. And I had to take 2 more years to have what equal to a high school diploma. And so that first day I went over there, I was scared, and, wondering what things were going to be like, and who I'd see. And I didn't know a single person in it. And that's hard on a kid, you got to know something. So I was told, I heard somebody saying we've got to go to chapel. I asked her about it, and they said, yes, you'd have to go to chapel. You have to go at 10 o'clock. And he says, right down the hall there. Well, it's 10 o'clock it was to be. So I got to one end of the hall and thought I'd just walk down till I found this place, the chapel. And when I got up to the 2 swinging doors that was there right in the middle of the building, from end to end, I just looked like that. I said, yeah, I guess that's it. But it didn't. I saw something better than the chapel. There was a girl standing there. And she was leaning on one of the doors. And I passed her and said,
This is a continuation of the recorded interview with Dr. Earl McBride.
12, I believe it was.
I wonder, backtracking just a little bit, why don't we describe Epworth, the school itself, as it existed, its operation, and how, as you recall it, and then let's talk about OU as it was during those years. And we're talking about 1906 and 7 at Epworth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that was during the ages where everybody was trying to build houses or run stores or do something to live on, and we finally got some streetcars in the place. And a man who was uncle, my wife's uncle, as I told you, they came to Edmond. They came on a freight car and got off the wrong place. Somebody was trying to send them to from where was it? Illinois. They came from Illinois. Their families. And Anton Klassen built these streetcars and made quite an organization and was the leader, you might say, in the town.
And he was your wife's uncle?
Yeah. And her father sold real estate for him. All Klassen Boulevard, all up and down from 16th. Let's see, well, I think it's 16, 15 maybe. You go through on Klassen now from you know where that old building is there, where they used to have the weather place. Well, the school, the orders of the campus was from 17th Street to 23rd Street, and from what's now Klassen on the, let's see, that'd be on the east side. The other side was on about 3 or 4 blocks.
Well, probably Blackwell or something, but the Epworth Methodist Church still occupies the administration building, isn't that correct?
No. Well, I don't think they do. The church,
Yes, they have the old building.
they have the old building.
The 1903,
Yeah. Well, they got broke.
the church school went
The
from.
church went broke because the South, what happened was Mr. Klassen was a Methodist, and I don't know the details of that, but I don't know the details of how the downhill went to the stand out that they have to get off of the property. But
So the north and south split, I know on that.
yeah, and well, they just wouldn't get joined right. They didn't, you know, just jealous.
Now, I understand that one of the principal stops on that railway was called University Station, 17th and Klassen,
Yeah.
is that right?
Yeah. Yes, it was a triangle brick building. Built something like a gasoline place now, and that was the transferring for 2 or 3 different ways. The Chartel was the end of the line coming up that way. I think it was 18th, and then they built later on down to where they built this little place so they could have a house where the kids went to the school there, and it was pretty handy for a lot of other people. And from then he built that streetcar line on out here to 36th Street. And you can see places where there's Putnam Park, they call it. That's still a vacant place in the park. I don't know what they call it now. And he made a lot of money one way or another through that. And he gave them all of that land between 23rd, what's now Klassen, and let's see, 2 blocks west would be what?
Klassen.
That's Klassen.
Probably Blackwell or McKinley.
McKinley, that's the one. Now from that street to 17th Street, from 17th to McKinley, and 23rd. What was the other one? There's four borders to it.
36.
Yeah. And that was the end of the classroom I call it line until I don't know just when happened. The church went up to Guthrie and made arrangement at the Scottish Rite building they had up there that was built before they got the big chapel made, and now I'm a 33rd to it, and it got along, and they stood by and held on. We had some good top men, I guess, that just held on to things, and that school didn't have any money, never did have any money, except just there's a lot of the teachers, I remember them talking, they just couldn't find anything to work at to subsidize their teaching time, and it made a very good school, and still going good. This man,
Whitten. This man,
yeah, the one that's now
President Whitten. Dolph
Whitten, yeah, Dolph Whitten, and he's doing real good with the various different departments of the school, and is doing wonderful work, I think, from what the quotations are.
Putnam Park once had a lake at one time and quite a bit of activity. I understood they had an outdoor theater. Do you recall any of the activity at Putnam Park?
I don't know anything about the theater. I was too busy to have any time to play up there.
They had a lake there, I know.
There was a lake around there. I've forgotten where it was.
What about Belle Isle Park? Now that came in.
Belle Isle Park belonged to Mr. Klassen. He had that property, and the gas company, I guess it was. Well, they had the lake more or less from to start with nuisance, because it was water, and people was building up there already, and they wanted to get rid of that water. And I don't know the details of that at all, but Klassen or somebody got busy and filled in and dug out until they made what's now Belle Isle. And all we knew at the time then, an awful nice place, and we'd go out there and go swimming. And they built us a board place out over the water, and we'd go out there, little crowds, you know, and things, parties, school things. And I nearly died with a frozen throat. I had learned to skate, ice skates at Watonga, and still had my skates, and so one day we got one of our unusual cold weather, and froze over. And we went out to see if it was all right and took our skates. And they had just built the new, what's out there now, the same old building that's sitting out there now, that brick building, yeah. And the ice was just like anybody do. You just walk out on that ice with your skates on. I was the first one to get my skates on, and I scooted out, you know, went out, oh, probably 20 feet, and I felt my skate going down on me every time I scooted. And I knew that was going to break through, sure as world. I tried to turn around, and it broke before that. And I went right down in a hole. No bottom. Heavy overcoat. But I just kept going and holding to the ice. And finally, I go this way, and then it breaks some over here. And I finally said it getting a little thick. And I finally got so I could get up. My coat and everything was so heavy, I couldn't hardly get in and get out of there. I had to roll up on the ice length long as I could get on and then work it up. And that was quite a place for picnics and stuff like that. Classen had an idea beyond what that is there now. And I didn't know for several years what his motives were. Huh? Oh, yeah, you can see a nice scene. That window over there. Yeah. They've got that all, the room all decorated.
Well, I believe not. I appreciate it. Just trying to lose a little weight. Thank you, though, very much. I do appreciate it.
Lose a little weight.
I need to.
Well, she's losing weight, don't you think she is?
What'd you say?
Said you were losing a little.
Putting this all on there.
Where'd you go to medical school?
Well, 2 years at Norman and 2 years at Columbia University, New York. Yeah.
Now, were you a medical doctor in World War I?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
No, not one. Yeah, World War I.
You were in the medical corps.
Yeah.
Did you begin your practice before or after the war?
I practiced medicine before that. I practiced at Ralston, Oklahoma. And first place, let me tell you another pioneer story. We moved.
Switchboard operator. And we were broke, you know. I could
Didn't broke. We didn't have anything to break. We just
sit in the cold, you know, when they come in for the doctor.
a little town up here of Nevada, and I met one of my classmates and the fraternity man, Sigma knew, that we got acquainted, and I told him that I was looking for a place to practice, start in. Well, he says, come up to our town. And I said, well, how big is your town? Well, he says, I think we got 70 people there. And, well, I said, where's the closest doctor? Well, he says, there's none between town west of there. Can't think what it was. And named the only towns we had, and they weren't any really, just little places. And Crescent, another one. So I decided to go up there because he knew quite a lot of people, and his father was a merchant, and so I took the baby, and who then was a year and a half, 2 years, and went up there to just do what I had to do. And the first night that I started to practice, we had just gone to bed, and we had an old folding bed. That one of these, you probably never saw one, but this is a bed that can be opened and like a lid, and then you can pull it back down. In daytime, you use it for a couch or anything. Yeah. And so we had gone to bed about 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock or something, and pretty soon somebody knocked on the front door, and we listened a little bit, and then he knocked again. He said, Doc, I want to see you. And I went to the door, and I said, come in, what's the matter? Oh, he says, this daughter of mine is just dying with a toothache. Well, come on in, I'll look at it and see what you got. So I looked at it, there wasn't anything you could see. But she was in pain, you know, how a toothache would be. And the girl was around 16 years old or more. And I didn't have many instruments, but fortunately down at Watonga, which was only about 12 miles from this little town of Hitchcock. By the way, it's getting to be quite a little town with oil down there now. But I said, well, he said, now, don't hurt her, Doc, don't hurt her. Kept saying that. Well, I said, you hold her, and maybe I can pull it. And the old doctor that had treated me as a boy several times with my teeth, and when I got home one time, just about the time I graduated, I visited with him, and he asked me all questions of what I was going to do and a lot of things. And so when I went to go, he said, the trouble that I'm going to have is if I have to pull a tooth, I don't know how. And I'd seen him pull teeth, inquisitive enough to look around and sit there and watch him. So this old fellow sat over here, and Pauline's wife there, she get that, honey? She'll get it. And so I had cocaine. Cocaine then wasn't a narcotic to anybody. It was just to kill pain. And so I went back, found my hypodermic needle place, and fixed up a tablet, a little sterile water, and injected it all around her tooth. Just fortunately, this dentist had given me two pairs of instruments. He told me, he said, now I want to give you this because you couldn't pull a tooth to save you without breaking the root off if you didn't have this kind of thing. He says, you just take that, Earl. Well, I didn't know it. He didn't show me how to use it, only he said, just when you do, just twist it and wiggle it carefully and it'll come out. Sounds like it's easy, you know. Yeah. And so I injected the needle around her place, and I set the old gentleman down like he was sitting there, and I said, now you hold her, both hands. Don't let her turn them, because no telling what'll hurt to her. I scared him all good. You just hold her so I can be real steady and not break the tooth off or anything. I leaned her back on a chair against the wall, you see, so her head could come back, or put a pillow back of her. And I started in there. I got the thing so numb she didn't feel anything at all. And I worked that thing around, up and down and back. Just pulled right out. So that was my first patient, and I spent 4 years to learn how to do it.
Medicine, first patient.
Yeah. But I just mentioned those to see that I started to scratch. And that gave me, bolstered me up a little bit. And I delivered babies around there, and delivered my own wife. Dr. Ishmael, do you know Dr. Ishmael? Well, he married my oldest daughter. He was pretty sick now. He got emphysema. Yeah. And that scared me more than anything. I had moved down to Savannah by that time, and I was about 12 miles from Guthrie. She was given pretty much toward delivering. And the doctor in Guthrie that I talked to, he said, well, doctor, I'll just come right down there as soon as you call me in any way you can. I never worried about it. One night I didn't have any car, I just had to drive a horse. We had this little buggy. We'd drive up there to Guthrie, go to a picture show or something. And we had gone up to this show. In the middle of the show, she said, Earl, Earl, oh, Earl, uh-oh. I said, you're in trouble. And sure enough, I thought maybe she could make it. And I'd get there all right and call the doctor. And we got home. It was about 12 miles. And by that time, the child was pretty far along. And it was rain, just rain, pitchforks. And so I called this doctor in Guthrie. He said, Earl, I just can't get out there. He said, it's just a regular flood up here. A little Cottonwood River up there. Maybe that's the name of it. It prevented him to get through with it. He had a horse and teaming a horse. And old red mud. And so I delivered the baby. And it came bottom first. Stick of the head. A lot of babies are killed. That, very careful. I delivered babies in New York as a senior year medic. And delivered babies down in the Bowery. And had all kinds of experiences and things. And I said I would never do orthopedics, and I didn't know anything about it. And the thing that turned me against it, I was sitting on the front row of the seats of the men who was listening to the lecture of the doctor. This was at Columbia University. And the doctor came in and said that he was going to talk to us on rickets in children. You know what rickets are? And get a deformity to the limbs, And so he lectured on this quite a while. There was three of us, two men from outside, besides me. One was from San Francisco, and the other one was from Nebraska. He was married, and myself. And then another one turned up from Nebraska, and he wanted in. So we sort of chummed together because these New York boys weren't very courteous. They're formal, different than we are down here. You speak to anybody and make any difference. If you don't speak to somebody, why you think they're mad at them. And so we stood together and sit with together. And I was right as close to that child. He called a doctor out at the end of the room from the curtains and said, "Now bring the child in and I'll show the doctors how we do this kind of a case to straighten their legs." And we didn't know what we were going to do. So he brought the fellow brought the cart and the baby on it and came right up to where I was. My stomach was almost touching to that table. And he went on talking about it and holding the kid's leg and knees and ankle and working with it a little bit. And he told this doctor at the end of the table, "Now, doctor, you start the anesthetic and get it well asleep. And tell me when you think he's asleep enough that I can straighten these legs." Well, after a bit he said, "Yes, you go ahead, do your work." And the doctor has already had a hold of that ankle with one hand and his knee and upper leg on the other one, and he just turned that thing backward to the opposite side and straightened that leg right out. Child was about 2.5, 3 years. And that nearly turned me again from fraction medicine. I'll tell you, it just about made me sick to hear that little child. Of course, he was full of chloroform and didn't hurt or anything. Those bones just bone right in my face, you might say. And I told the boy next to me, Stubby, I forget his name, called him Stubby. He was from Yale. And I said, "Look, that poor kid," I said, "Well, I'm never going to do that kind of medicine. Do anything else." And I followed the kid through, and it just did fine and straightened out. And so I never thought of doing orthopedics, though. I got back here after the Army, and I went in as a first lieutenant and was sent out as a captain, but I never got a dime's worth of captain's pension. I mean, his pay, and I didn't get anything in a pension or anything. But I had learned a great deal in the 16 months, I believe it was, that I was active in overseas. England, I didn't get to France, but I was accidentally thrown with the women of American women that had married titled Englishmen. And there was quite a crowd of them. They had a club. And my partner and I were invited to these, and they'd also give us free tickets to the theaters. One of these club sessions, a lady come along, and we'd already met her, and she'd met us several people, and she said, "Oh, there's a lady over here that you haven't met yet, hasn't it?" I told her no. And she says, "Oh my, you mustn't leave this room without meeting her." Well, I thought, who in the world? Must be the Queen or something. And so we walked over there with her, and she was introduced, very formal, very fine-looking woman, about 60 years old. And she said, "Oh, have you been to my home?" And I said, "Well, no, we haven't. We just got here. We're just kind of starting in here." "Oh my goodness," he said, "before you get busy, why, you come out to my home." And she said they open house at our house at Thursday. Give me some hours, an hour or two in the evening. So she went. I wondered what in the world it was. And this fellow, about my age, doctor, he was astounded. He didn't know what was into. So she drifted off, and we went another direction. And I went back to this woman that introduced her, and I said, "Who was that lady?" Well, she said it was, what was his name? I've lost his name. Anyway, she was the wife of the American ambassador in England. And so I said, "Well, I guess we'll just have to go out and see that." And we did. And that was the key that got me into the level of being a surgeon. As it turned out later, and a bone surgeon. There was a man sitting in a soft coffee around the corner of the bedroom, and this man was sitting on a couch, just about like I was here, and by himself. Nobody else in the room. And I felt just like he looked. I went in and sat down by him and asked him, after I got acquainted with him, where he came from. He came from Boston. And he was older than I was, about 3 years, but he had graduated and was an active surgeon there. And we had a little conversation. People like that in the East then was very anxious to hear what Oklahoma was like anyway, you know. He kind of took a fancy to me, I noticed that. And so we left and went back to our other place there in London and talked a little about it until about 2 days later. I had got tired of these puttees, those wrap-around puttees that they put on the private. Start them out with that, and brass buttons, olive color paint, and old sloppy shoes. It was what the Munson Lance was made bigger around the toes and feet because it would pinch your toes, something like that, you know. And so I got tired of that stuff. And 3 or 4 days downtown, and I saw a fella with a swagger stick under his shoulder, you know, in English, and all the English captains on up, majors and everything, wouldn't go outdoors without have a little stick under their arm, you know. And then he had polished boots and Sam Brown belt. We didn't have that, just a straight old coat. This just looked terrible today, terrible. And so I hope, by golly, I'll get some of those. I happened to run across a store and had that stuff in the window. I went in and looked, and it wasn't beyond what I could spend then. Because I had just got there. Still had some of my money that I was going to live on for a month or so. And so I just bought some boots and spurs too. Spurs. And the middle of the night, I thought it was in the middle of the night, I heard somebody rummaging around in the, you want to change? No. There's some rattling around in the room, and I heard it, but I was sleepy as can be, and I didn't get up to see. I understood that it was the orderly, and so he left. It came daylight, and Liggett, the other man in my room, said, "Did you hear what I heard last night?" And I said, "What do you mean?" "Well," he said, "there was some racket in here and scrubbing or something." And well, I said, "I heard that too." So I got up there and looked around, and first didn't see anything, and so I got up, dressed up to where he was laughing at me getting their stuff, and I put it all on, and I got up to the point of where I put on my jacket, and I looked at it, and I thought, well, good gracious, what's happened to these buttons that don't look right? Well, Liggett said, "I don't know, something happened last night." I said, "I heard somebody scratching around. Do you suppose he took the paint off of our buttons?"